I was at my boyfriend's family reunion when everyone begged me to sleep with his brother. So I did. My boyfriend Lustig and I had been dating for 4 years when I asked why I'd never met his family. Trust me, after my ex, that's never happening again. He'd always say. But then his mom called about their annual barbecue. I heard her over the phone. Why are you still hung up on that? Just bring her already. We need to meet her. The whole drive there, he kept muttering about his psycho family and how they would probably ruin everything again. His aunt opened the door and her whole face just fell apart. "Oh my gosh, you actually came," she gasped, then slapped both hands over her mouth like she said something she shouldn't have. Over her shoulder, I saw his mom rushing toward us. "Oh, hey," she introduced herself, then immediately diverted the conversation. "Lustig's brother Stefan is here too," she said, way too bright, way too loud. "You two should meet." "Mom, stop," Lustig snapped, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Every single conversation stopped when we walked towards the backyard. Lustig's brother especially stared at me in shock. "You must be," Stefan started. "She doesn't need to meet everyone," Lustig interrupted him, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. But his mom literally pushed Lustig aside. "Come sit, sweetheart. Right here next to Stefan. You two have so much in common." Lustig's hand on my thigh kept getting tighter with every word they said about Stefan. "I need a beer," Lustig announced. But when he tried to pull me up with him, Stefan stood too. "Why don't you help me get the beers?" Stefan asked me, but it wasn't really a question. Then he turned to Lustig. "Mom needs help with something. Stay here." "She doesn't need to help with tea," Lustig snarled. But his dad suddenly appeared. "Lustig, come look at my new car." His dad's voice had this edge that made it clear this wasn't optional. In the kitchen, Stefan handed me a knife and cutting board, but didn't give me anything to cut. He just stood there, looking at me like I was a math problem he couldn't solve. "Your family's intense," I said, trying to break the weird tension. "I'm sorry about them," he said quietly. "They mean well. They want." He stopped, shaking his head. Before he could finish, Lustig stormed in. "We're leaving. We just got here. Now." But his mom blocked the doorway. "You're not going anywhere. Not until..." She looked at me, then at Stefan, and something passed between them that I didn't understand. "Not until after dinner." The rest of the afternoon was like watching a car crash in slow motion. His sister got drunk and at one point grabbed my face and said, "Just kiss Stefan already." We're all thinking it. Finally, Lustig took my wrist and dragged me toward a corner of the yard. "We're leaving. Now. My family's trying to..." That's when Stefan exploded. "Enough!" The entire yard went silent. "She deserves to know that she could do better," his mom started. "No," Stefan cut her off. "She deserves to know the truth. Right now." His mom went white. "Stefan, you just found out today you don't understand. I understand enough." He turned to his sister. "Get my laptop." "Stefan, please," his mom begged. "We were trying to handle this delicately. By trying to get her to leave him for me instead of just telling her what Lustig did." He stopped, running his hands through his hair. "Get the laptop." Lustig tried to grab me again, but his own father held him back. "You did this to yourself," his dad said quietly. When the laptop appeared, Stefan's hands were shaking so bad he could barely type. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing at first. He scrolled through dozens of clips of me. In my bedroom, in my shower, during intimate moments with Lustig that I thought were private. All uploaded onto Pornhub. All paired with the most disgusting titles I'd ever seen. "Pathetic girlfriend doesn't know she's worthless. Stupid bitch thinks she matters." My knees gave out, but Stefan caught me, held me up while I stared at years of violation, organized by the likes and comments. "I only found out today," Stefan said, his voice breaking. "Mom called me this morning. They thought if they could just get you to leave him for someone else, you'd never have to know." He clicked another file, one on Google Drive. Lustig's drunk voice filled the yard. "F you guys. She'd never leave me for Stefan. I've made sure of that. I trained her to think she's worthless. She actually believes she's lucky to have me. I'm selling her ass online and she's too stupid to know." Stefan held my hair back while I vomited. Lustig was already walking away towards his car. But his family, especially his dad, didn't plan on letting him walk so easily. I'm sitting in Stefan's car outside a cheap motel 20 minutes from the barbecue, and I can't stop shaking even though the engine is off and we're just parked here in silence. Stefan hasn't tried to touch me or talk to me. He's just waiting, and somehow that makes it easier to finally open the door and walk toward the front desk on legs that don't feel like mine. The clerk barely looks up when I ask for a room, just slides a key across the counter and points toward the stairs. Stefan carries my overnight bag that someone must have grabbed from Lustig's car, and I follow him up the concrete steps because I don't know what else to do. The motel room is basic but clean, and the moment Stefan sets my overnight bag inside and says he'll be right outside if I need anything, I lock the door and immediately fall apart. The panic attack hits so hard I end up on the bathroom floor, hyperventilating into a towel so Stefan won't hear me through the walls. My chest feels like someone's sitting on it and I can't get enough air, and all I can see when I close my eyes are those video titles with my face next to them. When I can finally breathe again 30 minutes later, I realize I need help beyond what Stefan or anyone at that barbecue can provide. I call a crisis hotline because I don't know what else to do, and the counselor on the other end walks me through breathing exercises before gently explaining that what Lustig did is a crime. She tells me to preserve all evidence, not to delete anything, and to consider filing a police report as soon as I'm ready. She also suggests getting a medical exam and finding a therapist who works with trauma, and suddenly I have a list of concrete actions instead of just drowning in shock. Stefan knocks softly and asks through the door if I need food or water, and when I open it, he's holding coffee and granola bars from the vending machine. I tell him what the hotline counselor said about evidence and police, and he immediately offers to help document everything before Lustig can delete it. We sit on opposite ends of the motel room with his laptop between us, and I start the horrible process of screenshotting every single video title and view count, while Stefan creates an encrypted backup drive. It takes 3 hours to document everything, and by the end I've thrown up twice and Stefan looks almost as destroyed as I feel. The titles are worse than I remembered from that first shocked viewing at the barbecue. Worthless girlfriend doesn't know she's being used. Stupid slut thinks I love her. Pathetic whore gets what she deserves. There are dozens more that make me want to crawl out of my own skin. Organized by upload date going back almost 3 years. Stefan saves everything with timestamps and metadata. His jaw clenched so tight I can hear his teeth grinding, but he doesn't say a word about what we're seeing. Around midnight, I almost text Lustig to scream at him, to demand answers, to ask how he could do this to someone he claimed to love. I type out a dozen different messages, each one angrier than the last, but Stefan gently reminds me that anything I send could mess up a police investigation. I delete the unsent texts and instead write everything I want to say in the Notes app on my phone, just to get the words out of my head even if Lustig never sees them. Marlena calls Stefan's phone at 1 in the morning, and when he puts it on speaker, I hear her begging him to bring me back so we can talk this through as a family. She keeps saying they can fix this, that we don't need to involve anyone else, that Lustig made a mistake but he's still my boyfriend and we can work it out. Stefan tells her we're not coming back and hangs up, but I make him save the voicemail because the way she's trying to cover this up feels like evidence too. Reese calls 20 minutes after Marlena and his voice sounds completely different, quiet and ashamed instead of demanding. He apologizes for not telling me sooner, says he only found out this morning when Marlena called him in a panic and offers to give a statement to police about what Lustig told the family. I don't know if I believe him about the timeline, but the offer to cooperate feels big enough that I tell Stefan to save this voicemail too. I finally fall asleep around 3 in the morning, still fully dressed on top of the motel bedspread, and wake up 6 hours later to 17 missed calls from Lustig's number. Stefan is asleep in his car in the parking lot because he didn't want to leave me alone, but also didn't want to make me uncomfortable by staying in the room. When I knock on his window to wake him, he immediately asks if I'm ready to go to the police, and I realize that I am. The police station is busier than I expected for a Saturday morning, and the officer at the front desk looks tired and skeptical when I say I need to report a crime. But when I explain what Lustig did, recorded me without consent, uploaded intimate content, the websites, the titles, her expression shifts to something like recognition, and she immediately calls for a detective. I sit in a plastic chair in the waiting area with Stefan beside me, holding the external hard drive with all the evidence and try not to think about how many strangers have seen those videos. A detective appears in the waiting area and introduces himself as Reed Hensley. He looks maybe 40 with graying hair and tired eyes, and his voice has this calm steadiness that makes me feel like he might actually listen instead of judging. He leads Stefan and me down a hallway that smells like old coffee and cleaning solution, past offices where other officers type reports or talk on phones, into a small interview room with a metal table and 3 plastic chairs. Reed gestures for us to sit and pulls out a notepad, clicking his pen twice before looking at me with an expression that feels patient and focused. I start talking, and once I begin, I can't stop. I tell him about the barbecue, about Stefan's laptop, about the videos with their horrible titles, about Lustig's recorded confession where he bragged about training me to think I was worthless. I describe the 4 years of our relationship that I now realize were built on lies and manipulation, how he isolated me from friends and made me believe I was lucky he stayed with me. Reed takes notes without interrupting, just nodding occasionally to show he's following, and he doesn't make me feel stupid or dramatic or like I'm overreacting. When I finish, my throat hurts from talking and my hands are shaking again, but Reed's expression hasn't changed to pity or disgust, just serious focus. Reed sets down his pen and explains that what Lustig did likely breaks several laws, including invasion of privacy and potentially revenge porn statutes, though he needs to review all the evidence to figure out exact charges. He writes a case number on a card and slides it across the table, telling me this is my official reference for the investigation. He walks through the process in steps that make sense. They'll need to verify the content, trace the uploads to confirm Lustig was the source, possibly get search warrants for his devices and apartment. It could take weeks or even months, and there's no promise of prosecution depending on what they find, but at least now there's an official record, and someone with authority taking this seriously. Reed asks Stefan to hand over the external hard drive with all the screenshots and metadata, and Stefan slides it across the table like it's something contaminated. Reed bags it carefully and labels it with my case number, then asks if there are any other devices or accounts where evidence might exist. I tell him about my own phone and laptop, about Lustig's cloud storage that Stefan found, about the voicemails from Marlena and Reese that we saved. Reed writes everything down and says they'll follow up on all of it. Reed leans forward and his tone shifts to something more personal. He advises me not to delete anything from my own devices even if looking at them makes me sick, because everything could be evidence. He tells me to avoid any contact with Lustig or his family except through lawyers, no texts or calls or meetings no matter how much they beg or threaten. Then he asks if I feel safe where I'm staying, and when I explain about the cheap motel, his mouth tightens. He suggests I find somewhere more stable for the next few weeks, somewhere Lustig doesn't know about, because protective orders take time to process, and guys like Lustig don't always respect boundaries. Stefan immediately offers his apartment, but I shake my head because staying with Lustig's brother feels too complicated, even though I trust him more than anyone else right now. Reed doesn't push, but he writes down information about victim advocates who can help me find emergency housing, and he gives me a pamphlet about emergency protective orders that I can file at the courthouse. He stands up and shakes both our hands, telling me he'll be in touch within a few days once they've reviewed the evidence, and to call him immediately if Lustig tries to contact me. Walking out of the police station into the bright Saturday afternoon feels surreal, like I've been in that interview room for days instead of just over an hour. Stefan drives me back to the motel and neither of us talks much. I stare out the window at normal people doing normal Saturday things, shopping and walking dogs and laughing with friends, and I can't connect their world to mine anymore. Back in the motel room, I sit on the edge of the bed and pull out my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I find Blake. She's been my closest friend since college, the one person who stayed in touch even when Lustig made it harder and harder for me to maintain friendships. I call her number, and when she answers with her usual cheerful greeting, I start crying before I can say hello. Blake's voice immediately shifts to concern, and she asks what's wrong, where I am, if I'm safe. I tell her everything. The barbecue, the videos, the titles, Lustig's confession, the police report, all of it spilling out in broken sentences between sobs. Blake doesn't interrupt or ask questions. She just listens. And when I finally finish, she says without hesitation that I'm staying at her place for as long as I need. She lives alone in a one-bedroom apartment but insists I can have the couch, and she'll take time off work to help me figure things out. The relief of having somewhere safe to go that isn't connected to Lustig's family makes me cry harder, and Blake just stays on the phone with me until I can breathe normally again. She asks if I need her to come get me, but I tell her Stefan is here and can drive me over. She makes me promise to come straight there, right now, and she'll have food and blankets ready. Stefan drives me to Blake's apartment across town, carrying my overnight bag up 3 flights of stairs while I follow behind feeling numb and exhausted. Blake opens the door before we can knock and pulls me into a hug that lasts long enough for me to feel safe. She thanks Stefan for helping me, and he just nods, looking uncomfortable with the gratitude. Before he leaves, he hands me the external hard drive with all the evidence, wrapped carefully in a plastic bag. He says he's made 3 backup copies in different secure locations, and he's written down all his contact information on a piece of paper that he tucks into my hand. I thank him for everything he's done, and he looks at me with this expression that's sad and guilty at the same time. He says he's sorry his family put me in this position, that he wishes he'd found out sooner, that he should have known something was wrong. Then he leaves before I can figure out how to respond, and Blake gently guides me inside and locks the door behind us. Blake has already set up a temporary space in her living room with extra blankets and pillows from her closet, making the couch look almost cozy. She doesn't push me to talk about details I'm not ready to share, instead just moving around her small kitchen making tea and pulling out snacks. We order Chinese takeout and eat it on the couch while watching mindless TV shows, some cooking competition where the biggest drama is someone's souffle falling. For a few hours, I can almost pretend this is just a normal visit, 2 friends hanging out on a Saturday night, instead of my life falling apart. But when I try to sleep that night, lying on Blake's couch in borrowed pajamas, every time I close my eyes, I see those video titles. Pathetic girlfriend doesn't know she's worthless. Stupid slut thinks I love her. I imagine all the strangers who watched me without my knowledge, who left comments and likes, who saw intimate moments I thought were private. I imagine them at their computers or on their phones, getting off on my humiliation and my stomach turns. Blake must hear me crying because she comes out of her bedroom around 2 in the morning and sits on the floor next to the couch, not saying anything, just being there until I finally fall asleep. Monday morning, I wake up to Blake already dressed for work, but she's made coffee and left a note saying to call her if I need anything. I find the pamphlet Reed gave me about victim advocates and dial the number, my hands shaking as it rings. A woman answers, and when I explain why I'm calling, her voice immediately becomes gentle and professional. She helps me understand my options for getting a protective order against Lustig, walking through the difference between emergency and permanent orders. She explains what evidence I'll need, what restrictions I can request, how long the process takes. She also gives me referrals for therapists who work with trauma and violation of privacy, including someone named Dinah Gray, who has immediate availability. I write down all the information in shaky handwriting, thanking her multiple times before hanging up. Then I call Dinah's office, and the receptionist schedules me for Tuesday afternoon, saying Dinah had a cancellation and wants to see me as soon as possible. Tuesday afternoon, I take an Uber to Dinah's office in a quiet professional building downtown. The waiting room has soft lighting and comfortable chairs, nothing like the harsh fluorescent police station. Dinah comes out to greet me herself, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a bun. Her office smells like lavender and has plants on the windowsill, making it feel less clinical than I expected. She doesn't make me tell the whole story right away, which surprises me. Instead, she teaches me grounding techniques for when the panic attacks hit. Simple things like pressing my feet into the floor and naming 5 things I can see. She helps me create a safety plan with concrete steps for different scenarios, what to do if I see Lustig, what to do if the intrusive thoughts get too bad, who to call in an emergency. We talk about how trauma lives in the body and how healing isn't linear, how some days will be better than others, and that's normal. For the first time since the barbecue, I feel like maybe I won't feel this broken forever. Like maybe there's a path forward even if I can't see the whole thing yet. I have to tell my boss something because I've already missed 2 days of work, and I need flexible scheduling for legal appointments and therapy. I call her Wednesday morning and keep it vague, saying I'm dealing with a personal crisis and a legal matter that requires some accommodation. My boss is surprisingly understanding, asking what I need rather than demanding details. I request to work from home for the next few weeks and she agrees immediately, saying my job is secure while I deal with this. I don't tell her the specifics because the shame of everyone at work knowing what Lustig did feels too much to handle. The thought of coworkers finding those videos, seeing me in those moments, makes me want to disappear. But at least I won't lose my job on top of everything else. Wednesday afternoon, the victim advocate meets me at the courthouse to help file for an emergency protective order. Standing in front of the judge to explain why I need protection from someone I dated for 4 years feels completely surreal. The judge is an older woman with reading glasses and a no-nonsense expression, and she listens carefully as I describe the videos, the titles, the fear I feel now that Lustig knows I've gone to police. I show her the case number Reed gave me and explain about the ongoing investigation. The judge asks a few questions about whether Lustig has contacted me since I left the barbecue, whether he knows where I'm staying, whether I fear for my safety. I answer honestly, my voice shaking but clear, and she nods slowly. She grants a temporary order that prohibits Lustig from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of my home or workplace, effective immediately. It's just a piece of paper, but knowing there are legal consequences if he violates it makes me feel slightly less like prey. The judge sets a date for a full hearing in 2 weeks where Lustig can respond, but for now the emergency order stands. Walking out of that courthouse with the order in my hand feels like the first real step toward taking back control. Thursday morning, I drive to Justina Westbrook's office in a building downtown with too much glass and not enough parking. Her assistant shows me to a conference room that smells like coffee and leather, and Justina walks in 5 minutes later carrying a yellow legal pad and a folder with my name on it. She's maybe 50 with gray hair pulled back, and the kind of direct eye contact that makes me feel like she's actually listening when I talk. She sits across from me and opens the folder, scanning through papers Reed must have sent over, then sets everything aside and looks at me. She explains that the criminal case against Lustig is up to the prosecutor based on Reed's investigation and the evidence they've gathered, but I can also pursue civil action for damages independently. She talks about emotional distress claims, invasion of privacy statutes, and potential monetary compensation for therapy costs and the harm he caused. Her voice stays calm and professional as she walks through different legal options, but she's honest that civil cases take months or years and require reliving everything multiple times through depositions and court appearances. I ask if it's worth it, and she doesn't give me an easy answer, just says it depends on what I need from the process beyond what the criminal case might provide. She estimates legal costs and explains contingency arrangements, then gives me a week to think about whether I want to move forward with civil litigation. The meeting lasts 90 minutes, and by the end my brain feels full of legal terms and strategic considerations, but at least I understand my options better than I did walking in. Before I leave, Justina suggests I also contact the websites hosting the content to request removal, and she gives me contact information for Mason Kwan, a platform trust and safety specialist she's worked with before on similar cases. She says Mason knows the process inside and out, and can help navigate the removal requests more effectively than trying to figure it out alone. I take the business card and thank her for her time, then sit in my car in the parking garage for 10 minutes trying to process everything before driving back to Blake's apartment. That afternoon, I email Mason using the address Justina provided, keeping the message brief and professional while explaining what happened and what content needs to be removed. I include the case number Reed gave me and mention Justina's referral, then hit send before I can overthink it. Mason responds within 3 hours, which surprises me given how many cases he probably handles. His email is thorough and kind without being patronizing, explaining the process for reporting non-consensual intimate content across different platforms. He says I'll need to verify my identity through secure channels and provide evidence that I didn't consent to the uploads, which feels invasive but necessary. He walks me through which platforms have the best removal policies and which ones will fight back or ignore requests entirely. Then he warns me about the reality I've been trying not to think about, that removal from major platforms is usually successful, but content can be downloaded and re-uploaded elsewhere by users who saved copies. Complete erasure from the internet is nearly impossible once something spreads beyond the original upload location. Reading that makes my stomach hurt, but at least I know what I'm facing instead of hoping for an outcome that won't happen. Mason offers to coordinate removal requests on my behalf if I want professional help managing the process, and I immediately accept, because doing this alone sounds overwhelming. Friday morning, Stefan texts asking how I'm doing, and I realize I haven't talked to him since he dropped me at Blake's apartment 4 days ago. I've been so focused on legal steps and therapy appointments that I didn't even think to check in with the person who first showed me the evidence and drove me to safety. I text back suggesting coffee and he agrees immediately, picking a place across town far from anywhere Lustig might be. We meet Saturday afternoon and Stefan looks tired, like he hasn't been sleeping well either. He orders coffee and sits across from me in a corner booth, and before I can figure out how to address the awkwardness, he just says it directly. He wants to help however I need, but he's not trying to replace his brother or start anything romantic, and if his support ever feels uncomfortable or confusing, I should tell him. The clarity of that boundary makes something in my chest relax that I didn't realize was tight. I can accept his continued support without feeling guilty or confused about his motivations, and I tell him I appreciate him saying it out loud instead of leaving it unsaid between us. We talk for an hour about normal things, work and books, and nothing related to Lustig, and it feels good to have a conversation that isn't entirely about trauma and legal proceedings. When we leave, he reminds me I can call if I need anything, and I actually believe he means it without ulterior motives. Sunday afternoon, my phone rings from a number I don't recognize, and I almost don't answer, but something makes me pick up. Marlena's voice comes through immediately, talking fast about how Lustig's ex-girlfriend was crazy and manipulative, and that's why the family was so protective. She suggests maybe I'm overreacting like the ex did, that Lustig has problems but he's not a bad person, and can't we all just talk about this calmly? Blake is sitting across from me when this happens, and she immediately starts recording on her own phone, holding it up so I remember to stay calm. I let Marlena talk herself in circles for 5 minutes, her voice getting more desperate as I don't engage with her arguments or defend my choices. When she finally runs out of steam, I thank her for her perspective in the flattest voice I can manage, then hang up without responding to any of her actual points. Blake stops recording, and we save the audio file with a timestamp, adding it to the growing collection of evidence that shows the family's continued attempts to manipulate and pressure me. I text Reed about the call, and he responds within minutes telling me to document every contact from family members because it could be relevant if they try to interfere with the case. Saturday morning, someone knocks on Blake's door, and I freeze until Blake checks the peephole and says it's Reese. I only agree to let him in because Blake is home, and I've already texted Reed that I was meeting with him. Reese walks in carrying an old laptop that looks like it's from at least 5 years ago, and he sets it carefully on the coffee table like it might explode. He says it belonged to Lustig in college, and he found it in a box in their garage, and he thought there might be more evidence on it about when this behavior started. His hands shake slightly as he explains, and he looks genuinely devastated in a way that's hard to fake. He tells me he's given Lustig an ultimatum: get professional help and take real accountability, or lose his family's support entirely. I don't know if I believe him about the timeline of when he knew what, but his actions keep supporting accountability rather than cover-up. I take the laptop and promise to give it to Reed, and Reese leaves quickly, like he can't stand to be in the room with his own guilt. Later that afternoon, I start going through items Lustig gave me over the years, trying to decide what to keep and what to throw away. There's a necklace from our second anniversary, a framed photo from a trip we took, a stuffed animal from our first anniversary that I used to sleep with. I'm holding a decorative wooden box he gave me 6 months ago, when something about the weight feels wrong. I open it and find jewelry inside like I remembered, but when I lift the velvet liner, there's a small camera underneath still recording to a memory card. The lens is pointed at an angle that would capture my bed if this box were still in my bedroom where I originally kept it. My hands start shaking so badly I almost drop the whole thing, but I manage to set it down carefully and find a plastic bag to preserve it as evidence. I call Reed, and my voice comes out higher than normal as I explain what I found, and he tells me to touch it as little as possible and he'll come collect it immediately. He arrives at Blake's apartment 30 minutes later with gloves and evidence bags, and he photographs the camera in place before carefully removing it. He also takes the old laptop Reese brought, saying this kind of physical evidence significantly strengthens the case beyond just the uploaded content. Reed explains he's already been working on getting a search warrant for Lustig's apartment and devices, and the hidden camera gives him additional justification for the scope of that warrant. He expects approval within the next week, and once they execute it, they'll have a clearer picture of the full scope of what Lustig was doing. The idea that there might be more cameras or more recordings makes me want to throw up, but at least Reed is taking it seriously and moving quickly. Tuesday evening, Jeremy calls my phone and I almost don't answer, but her name on the screen makes me curious enough to pick up. She sounds sober this time, her voice quiet and steady as she apologizes for what she said at the barbecue about me kissing Stefan. She admits Marlena had been pressuring the whole family for weeks before I arrived, telling everyone that if they could just get me interested in Stefan, I'd leave Lustig without ever having to know about the videos. Jeremy says she felt sick being part of it, but didn't know how to stand up to their mother, and now she feels responsible for how everything unfolded the way it did. I don't tell her it's okay because it's not, but I appreciate that she's calling to take accountability instead of making excuses. She offers to give a statement to Reed about the family pressure and Marlena's manipulation, if it would help the case, and I tell her I'll let Reed know she's willing to cooperate. We don't talk long, but the conversation feels genuine in a way Marlena's call didn't, and I hang up feeling like at least one person in that family is trying to do the right thing, even if it's complicated. Work is getting harder to manage even from home because I can't focus on normal tasks when my brain is stuck on the investigation and the therapy and the constant fear that someone I know has seen those videos. I miss deadlines I've never missed before, and my boss notices, pulling me into a video call Wednesday morning to check in. She asks if everything is okay, and I end up telling her more than I planned. Not graphic details, but enough that she understands this is serious. I mention legal proceedings and therapy and needing some flexibility with my schedule, and she doesn't push for specifics I'm not ready to share. She immediately loops in HR to discuss formal accommodations, and within 2 hours I have an email confirming I can work reduced hours for the next month with flexible scheduling for appointments. My boss makes it clear my job is secure while I deal with this, and the relief of not having to worry about losing my income on top of everything else makes me cry for the first time in days. Thursday afternoon, Reed calls to tell me the court served Lustig with the temporary protective order at his apartment that morning. Within an hour, Lustig violated it by calling my phone 12 times in a row from his own number. I didn't answer any of the calls, but I saved the call log with timestamps, and Reed tells me to document every single violation, because it strengthens both the criminal case and my request for a permanent order. The fact that Lustig can't even follow a basic court order for 1 hour tells me everything about how little control or remorse he actually has, and it makes me grateful I'm staying somewhere he doesn't know about. The following week, Reed calls to tell me the search warrant got approved and they're executing it that morning. I pace around Blake's living room for 3 hours, checking my phone every 2 minutes until Reed texts that they finished and seized everything from Lustig's apartment. His laptop, phone, tablet, 3 external hard drives, and 2 more hidden cameras they found tucked in his bedroom closet, pointing at the bed. Reed says they detained Lustig for questioning at the station, but he lawyered up immediately and didn't say anything useful. 4 hours later, Reed calls again and his voice sounds tired when he tells me Lustig posted bail and got released the same day. My hands start shaking so bad I drop my phone and Blake has to pick it up and put it on speaker. Reed promises they're monitoring Lustig closely, and the protective order is still in place with serious consequences if he violates it. But all I can think about is him being out there somewhere, angry and knowing where I work even if he doesn't know where I'm staying. That night I barely sleep, jumping at every sound in Blake's apartment and checking the locks on the doors and windows at least 6 times before I finally pass out from exhaustion around 4 in the morning. 3 days later, Reed calls with the forensics report and asks if I can come to the station because there's a lot to go over. I drive there with my stomach in knots, and Reed takes me to the same interview room where I first reported everything. He opens his laptop and shows me a spreadsheet that makes my vision blur. Cloud backups going back 5 years, which means content from before we were even officially dating, from when I thought we were just casually seeing each other. Hundreds of files organized by date and location with notes about what each one contains. Videos, photos, audio recordings. Reed scrolls through the list and I see entries from my bedroom, my bathroom, my living room, the hotel we stayed at for my birthday 2 years ago, his car, a changing room at a store we went to together. Many of the angles and situations are ones where I never knew I was recorded, never saw a camera or phone positioned anywhere. The scope of it is so much bigger than what was uploaded publicly, and I realized that almost nothing in my entire relationship was actually private. Reed gives me time to process and offers to get me water, but I just sit there staring at the spreadsheet trying to understand how someone could do this for years. Later that afternoon, I have my regular session with Dinah, and I spend the entire hour trying to explain the forensics report and what it means. She helps me understand that the violation isn't just about the content that was uploaded, it's about the systematic destruction of my privacy and autonomy over multiple years. We don't even get to the exercises she planned because I'm too busy trying to wrap my head around the fact that Lustig was recording me during moments I thought were completely private, during conversations where I was vulnerable, during times when I was just existing in my own space. The next day, Reed tells me Stefan came in for his formal witness interview, and it went well. Stefan brought the audio recording of Lustig's drunken confession from the barbecue and gave detailed testimony about the family's knowledge and their attempted cover-up. Reed says Stefan was cooperative and credible, answering every question thoroughly and not trying to protect Lustig or minimize what happened. His statement matches everything I've reported and adds context about the family dynamics and Marlena's pressure campaign before I arrived at the barbecue. Having someone from Lustig's own family willing to testify against him feels significant in a way I can't quite explain. Like maybe I'm not completely alone in this, even though it started that way. Reed also interviewed Marlena, but her session went very differently according to him. He calls me after to give me an update and says her story kept changing throughout the interview. She claimed at first that she didn't know about the videos until the morning of the barbecue when Stefan called her, but then when Reed pressed her on timeline details, she admitted she actually found out weeks earlier. Then she changed her story again and insisted Lustig told her it was consensual content we made together, and she had no reason to doubt him. Reed documented all the contradictions and inconsistencies in his report, and he tells me that her attempts to obstruct and mislead actually helped the case because they show consciousness of guilt within the family. Meanwhile, Mason sends me an email with good news and bad news. The good news is he successfully got the videos removed from the main platform where they were uploaded, working with their trust and safety team to verify the content was non-consensual and get it taken down. The bad news comes 3 days later when he finds mirrors and downloads on at least 7 smaller sites that are harder to reach. He sets up monitoring alerts that will notify him if my name or image appears on new platforms. And he keeps submitting takedown requests to every site he finds, but he's honest with me that this is going to be an ongoing process potentially for years. Some of these smaller sites are hosted overseas or operate in legal gray areas that make removal complicated. The idea that those videos might exist somewhere on the internet forever makes me feel physically ill, but at least someone is actively working to minimize the damage and catch new uploads quickly. Justina calls me into her office the following week to review the civil case strategy. She's drafted formal preservation letters to all the platforms Mason identified, legally requiring them to preserve evidence and metadata in case we move forward with litigation. She also prepared a demand letter to Lustig's attorney, outlining the potential civil claims for invasion of privacy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violation of state revenge porn laws. The letter suggests we discuss settlement before filing a lawsuit and gives them 30 days to respond. I tell Justina I'm not sure I want money from Lustig, that mostly I want him to face real consequences and never be able to do this to anyone else. She explains that the threat of civil action gives us leverage in the criminal case and forces Lustig to take this seriously. Plus, monetary damages can compensate me for therapy costs and the ongoing harm to my reputation and mental health. In my next therapy session, Dinah introduces cognitive behavioral techniques for managing the intrusive thoughts and shame spirals that hit me multiple times a day. We practice challenging the automatic thoughts that tell me this was somehow my fault, or that I should have known what Lustig was doing. She has me write down the thought, then identify the evidence for and against it, then come up with a more balanced perspective. The exercises feel awkward and forced at first, like I'm just going through the motions without really believing the alternative thoughts. But Dinah says that's normal, and the goal is to practice the skill even when it feels fake, because eventually my brain will start to accept the more balanced perspective automatically. After a few weeks of daily practice, I notice I can sometimes catch the shame spiral before it completely takes over, recognizing the pattern and redirecting my thoughts before I spiral into believing I'm worthless or stupid for not seeing what Lustig was doing. One lonely Friday night, I download a dating app thinking maybe I can start moving forward and prove to myself that not everyone is like Lustig. I spend 20 minutes setting up my profile and choosing photos that feel safe and normal. But the moment I start swiping through profiles, I have a full panic attack imagining any of these strangers having seen those videos, recognizing me, knowing intimate details about my body and my private moments. My chest gets tight and I can't breathe, and I delete the app within 10 minutes, sitting on my bathroom floor trying to calm down. In my next session with Dinah, I tell her what happened and she helps me understand that I'm not ready for dating yet, and that's completely okay. Healing doesn't follow a timeline, and pushing myself too fast will only cause more harm. She reminds me that right now my priority needs to be safety and stability, not proving to myself that I can move on or that I'm not broken. 2 weeks later, Reed calls with an update that makes my stomach drop all over again. The forensics team found additional files on Lustig's devices that weren't uploaded publicly, including recordings from bathrooms and changing rooms in places we visited together. Some of the locations appear to be public spaces where recording would be illegal regardless of consent, like the bathroom at a restaurant we went to for our anniversary, or the changing room at a department store where I tried on clothes while he waited outside. Reed says the charges are likely going to expand beyond what was initially reported, because recording in those spaces violates different laws than recording in private residences. The prosecutor is taking the case very seriously and building toward multiple felony counts. The next morning, Reese contacts me through Stefan to say he found Lustig's old phone from 2 years ago in a box in their garage. He's bringing it directly to Reed without even telling Marlena, because he doesn't trust her not to try to interfere or destroy evidence. Reese says he's done protecting his son, and he wants me to have every piece of evidence that might help the case. I'm still not sure I fully trust Reese's motives, or whether he's genuinely committed to accountability, or just trying to manage his own guilt. But his actions are consistently supporting the investigation rather than the cover-up, which is more than I can say for Marlena. Reed calls me 3 days later to say the prosecutor wants to move forward with formal charges and needs to schedule a preliminary hearing. He explains over the phone that this hearing is different from a trial. It's just to show the judge there's enough evidence to proceed with the case. I'll need to testify about the relationship and how I found out about the videos, but most of the hearing will focus on the physical evidence they collected from Lustig's devices. Reed says the prosecutor is confident based on what forensics found, and the hearing date gets set for 3 weeks from now. Hanging up the phone, I feel this weird mix of validation that they're taking it seriously, and terror about having to stand in a courtroom and talk about the most private, horrible moments of my life in front of strangers. The next Tuesday, I'm leaving work around 6 when I notice Marlena standing next to my car in the parking lot. My whole body goes cold because the protective order only covers Lustig, not his family, and she knows it. She steps forward as I approach and starts talking before I can tell her to leave. She says I'm destroying her son's life over one mistake, that Lustig has been seeing a therapist now and really learning to be better, and can't I find it in my heart to forgive him and drop the charges. Her voice has this pleading quality that might have worked on me months ago, but now I just feel angry that she's ambushing me at my workplace. I take a breath and tell her calmly that I'm not dropping anything, that what Lustig did wasn't a mistake but a pattern of violations over years. She starts to argue, but I turn away and get in my car, locking the doors immediately. The moment I'm safely inside, I call Reed and tell him what just happened. He asks if I recorded it, and I say no, so he suggests I start keeping my phone ready to record any future interactions with family members, since they're not covered by the protective order, but could be evidence of witness intimidation. I meet with Reed the next morning and give him a detailed written account of everything Marlena said in the parking lot, including her exact words about dropping charges and Lustig being in therapy. Reed adds it to the case file and says the prosecutor is very interested in this pattern of the family trying to pressure me and interfere with the investigation. He mentions they might pursue additional charges related to witness tampering if Marlena or anyone else keeps trying to contact me. Knowing that her behavior is actually helping build the case instead of hurting it makes me feel less scared about her attempts to manipulate me. Reed also gives me a small recording device to keep in my purse, just in case anyone else tries to corner me somewhere. That afternoon, I have an appointment with Justina to work on my victim impact statement for the preliminary hearing. She explains that I'll have a chance to speak directly to the judge about how Lustig's actions affected me, and this statement will become part of the official record. We sit in her office for 2 hours while I try to put everything into words on paper. I write about the betrayal of someone I trusted completely, about how he didn't just record me without permission, but actively tried to humiliate me with those disgusting titles and comments. I write about not being able to sleep, about feeling unsafe in my own body, about how I can't trust my own judgment anymore because I missed all the signs for 4 years. I write about the panic attacks and the constant fear that someone I know has seen those videos, about how he turned intimate moments into entertainment for strangers who left comments rating my body and laughing at the titles. Reading it back to Justina makes me cry so hard I can barely breathe, but she says it's powerful and honest and exactly what the judge needs to hear. She makes copies and files it with the court, and I keep one for myself, even though looking at it makes me feel sick. 2 days before the preliminary hearing, I get a call from an unknown number and almost don't answer. But something makes me pick up and it's Jeremy on the other end. She sounds nervous and talks fast, saying she needs to tell me something important. She says she's willing to testify at the hearing about the family pressure and Marlena's attempts to manipulate the whole situation, even though it means going against her mother and probably causing huge problems in the family. She admits she's scared of how Marlena will react and worried about losing her relationship with her parents. But she keeps saying that what Lustig did is too serious to protect, and she wants to support me even though we barely know each other. I'm quiet for a long time because I don't know if I can trust anyone from that family after everything that happened. But Jeremy sounds genuine, and her willingness to testify despite the personal cost feels real in a way that Marlena's parking lot tears didn't. I tell her I appreciate it and that she should contact Reed directly to give her statement. After we hang up, I sit there wondering if she'll actually follow through or if this is another manipulation. But Reed calls me an hour later to say Jeremy already reached out and scheduled her interview. The preliminary hearing happens on a cold morning 3 weeks after Reed first told me about it, and I feel sick the entire drive to the courthouse. Blake comes with me for support and sits in the gallery while I wait to be called. The prosecutor presents all the evidence first, showing the judge screenshots of the uploaded videos with their titles, the forensics report from Lustig's devices showing hundreds of recordings, and the audio file of Lustig's drunken confession about manipulating me. Reed testifies about the investigation and the hidden cameras they found. Then it's my turn, and I walk to the witness stand on legs that don't feel steady. The prosecutor asks me basic questions about the relationship, and when I discovered what Lustig had done, and I answer as clearly as I can, even though my voice shakes. Lustig sits at a table with his attorney and doesn't look at me once. When the prosecutor asks me to read my victim impact statement, I pull out the paper with hands that won't stop trembling and read every word I wrote about the betrayal and violation and fear. My voice breaks twice, but I keep going until I reach the end. The judge listens carefully and thanks me for my courage before calling a short recess. When we come back, the judge announces that she finds probable cause to proceed with formal charges, including multiple counts of invasion of privacy and illegal recording. She also grants my request for a full protective order lasting 1 year, with strict rules about contact and how close Lustig can come to my home or workplace. Walking out of that courthouse knowing he's facing real legal consequences makes me feel something close to relief for the first time in weeks. 2 days after the hearing, I'm at Blake's apartment making dinner when my phone buzzes with a text from a number I don't recognize. The message says I'm ruining his life and I'll regret this. And even though it doesn't say Lustig's name, I know it's him. My hands start shaking as I screenshot the message and immediately send it to Reed. He calls me back within 10 minutes and says this is a clear violation of the protective order and could result in Lustig's bail getting taken away or additional charges filed. He asks me to forward the actual message to him and document the exact time I received it. The fact that Lustig is still trying to scare and control me even while facing criminal charges shows he hasn't learned anything and doesn't actually feel sorry for what he did. Reed moves fast, and within a week there's another hearing, this time about the protective order violation. The judge looks angry as she reviews the evidence of the burner phone message, and she tightens Lustig's bail conditions significantly. Now he has to wear GPS monitoring so the court can track his location at all times, and he's required to attend mandatory counseling sessions twice a week. The judge also prohibits him from using any electronic devices that aren't registered with the court, which should prevent him from getting another burner phone to contact me. It's not jail time, but it's serious consequences for someone who thought he could keep threatening me even through the legal process. Lustig's attorney tries to argue that the message could have come from anyone, but the judge isn't buying it and makes it clear that any future violations will result in immediate jail time. That same week, Mason sends me a detailed report about the content removal efforts. He's successfully gotten the videos taken down from 15 different websites and platforms, and he's set up automated monitoring that scans major sites for my name and image. He's also working with a reputation management service to push down search results so the videos are harder to find even if someone is looking. But he warns me this is going to be an ongoing battle rather than a one-time fix, because content can get downloaded and re-uploaded to new sites constantly. The idea that I'll need to keep monitoring the internet for my own violated privacy for potentially years makes me feel exhausted and angry all over again. At least I have professional help managing it instead of trying to do it alone. Around the same time, I start getting messages on social media from accounts I don't recognize. They call me horrible names and say I'm destroying an innocent man's life over nothing, that I'm probably lying for attention or money. Some of the messages are clearly from people who watch the videos because they reference specific things that were in them. I block the accounts as fast as they appear, but new ones keep popping up. In my next session with Dinah, she helps me understand this is a really common tactic when someone faces consequences for sexual violations. Either Lustig's friends are defending him, or it might even be Lustig himself making anonymous accounts to keep harassing me. She coaches me on setting better boundaries online, including making all my accounts fully private and blocking people freely without feeling guilty about it. The harassment is triggering and makes me want to delete all my social media, but Dinah reminds me I shouldn't have to give up parts of my life because of what he did. Instead, I learned to not engage with the messages at all, to screenshot them for Reed in case they become relevant to the case, and to remember that people sending anonymous hate messages are not credible sources of truth about my situation. A week after the harassment started, Justina calls me to her office to review the civil complaint she's prepared. The document is thick, maybe 40 pages, and seeing my name at the top as the plaintiff makes everything feel more real and official. She walks me through each section, explaining how she's framing the invasion of privacy claim, the emotional distress argument, and the state revenge porn law violations. The complaint lists specific damages like my therapy costs, which are already over $3,000, the time I've missed from work, and the ongoing harm from knowing those videos might exist online forever. She's also asking for punitive damages, which she explains means extra money meant to punish Lustig and stop him from ever doing this again to anyone else. The numbers she's written down are bigger than I expected, over $100,000 total, and part of me feels guilty asking for that much money. But Justina reminds me this isn't about greed. It's about holding him accountable in every way the law allows. She files the complaint that afternoon and sends a settlement demand letter to Lustig's attorney, giving him 30 days to respond before we move forward with full litigation. She seems confident we can settle the civil case before the criminal trial even happens, especially since the evidence is so clear, and Lustig's attorney knows how bad this looks. 2 days later, Stefan texts asking if we can meet for coffee, and when we sit down at the same place we met before, he seems nervous. He tells me he's joined a support group for family members of people who've done serious harm, and he's been going to meetings twice a week to work through his own guilt and confusion about what his brother did. He makes it really clear that he's not telling me this to get closer to me, or use it as some excuse to spend more time together. He just thought I should know he's taking this seriously, and not minimizing what Lustig did, or making excuses for him. The group is helping him understand how his family's dysfunction enabled Lustig's behavior, and how their attempt to cover it up made everything worse. I appreciate how direct he's being about maintaining boundaries between us, and I tell him I'm glad he's getting help processing this because it can't be easy having a brother who did something this horrible. We finish our coffee and go our separate ways, and I feel good about the fact that Stefan keeps proving he's trustworthy and respectful, even when it would be easy to cross lines. The next week I start apartment hunting because staying at Blake's place was always meant to be temporary, and I need my own space again. I find a place across town in a neighborhood Lustig has never been to and doesn't know about, and the building has way better security than my old apartment. There are cameras at all the entrances, a doorman who works the front desk during the day, and a secure parking garage with gate access. The rent is higher than I was paying before, but I decide the peace of mind is worth the extra money. Blake helps me move my stuff from storage and set up the new place, and we spend a whole Saturday arranging furniture and hanging pictures and making it feel like home. Having my own space again after weeks of crashing on her couch feels like a real step forward in rebuilding my life. I can close my own door and know I'm safe here, and Lustig doesn't even know this address exists. The first night sleeping in my own bed in my own apartment, I actually sleep through the night without waking up from nightmares. Over the next few weeks, something shifts without me really noticing at first. The constant legal updates and therapy appointments and monitoring of the internet start to fade into a routine instead of feeling like a crisis. I'm still getting updates from Reed about the investigation, and Mason about content removal, and Justina about the civil case, but it doesn't consume every minute of every day anymore. I realize I'm having more good days than bad ones, where I can focus on work and see friends and do normal things without the panic and shame taking over. I'm sleeping better most nights, and the panic attacks that used to hit multiple times a day are down to maybe once or twice a week. I can sometimes go hours without thinking about what Lustig did, and when the thoughts do come, they don't completely destroy me like they used to. The trauma isn't gone, and I'm definitely not over it, but I'm learning to function around it and build a life that isn't entirely defined by what happened. Dinah tells me this is what healing looks like. Not a straight line, but gradual improvement with setbacks mixed in. 3 months after the barbecue, Reed calls with news that the prosecutor wants to offer Lustig a plea deal. The terms are specific. Plead guilty to felony invasion of privacy and misdemeanor distribution of intimate images. Accept a sentence of probation with strict conditions including sex offender registration, and agree to pay restitution for my therapy and legal costs. Reed gives me the prosecutor's number and suggests I talk to Justina about what this means before I react. When I meet with Justina later that day, she walks me through the pros and cons of accepting versus pushing for trial. A plea deal means certainty, knowing exactly what consequences Lustig will face without the risk of a jury finding him not guilty, or giving him a lighter sentence. It also means avoiding the trauma of a full trial, where I'd have to testify in detail about everything he did and potentially be cross-examined by his attorney. But accepting the plea also means potentially lighter consequences than what a conviction after trial might bring, and it means giving up the chance to see him face a jury and have 12 people confirm that what he did was wrong. Justina is honest that trials are unpredictable and emotionally brutal, and the plea offer includes serious permanent consequences like the felony conviction and sex offender registration that will follow Lustig for the rest of his life. She says ultimately it's my choice and she'll support whatever I decide, but she wants me to really think about what I can handle emotionally versus what outcome I need to feel like justice was served. I tell her I need a few days to think about it and talk to the people I trust. Over the next week, I have conversations with Dinah about the emotional toll of going to trial, with Reed about the strength of the case, and what trial would actually involve, with Justina about the legal implications of each option, and with Blake about what she thinks I should do. Everyone is careful not to pressure me either way, but Dinah points out that my mental health has to be the priority, and avoiding months more of legal proceedings might be worth accepting slightly lighter consequences. Reed says the case is strong, but juries are unpredictable, and the plea deal guarantees Lustig faces real punishment. Blake just asks me what I think I'll regret more, accepting the plea or pushing for trial, and that question helps me realize what I actually want. After all these conversations, I call Justina and tell her I want to accept the plea deal. The guaranteed consequences and avoiding the trauma of trial feels like the right choice for my mental health, even though part of me really wants to see Lustig have to face a jury and hear 12 strangers say he's guilty. Justina reminds me that a felony conviction and sex offender registration are serious permanent consequences that will impact his life in major ways, and I shouldn't minimize how significant those outcomes are just because it's not prison time. The plea hearing is scheduled for 2 weeks later, and Justina helps me prepare my victim impact statement. Standing in the courtroom with Lustig sitting 20 feet away at the defense table is one of the hardest things I've ever done. My voice only shakes a little as I read the statement describing what his actions did to me. I talk about the betrayal of someone I trusted completely, the violation of my privacy and body, the ongoing fear and shame that follows me everywhere. I explain how he didn't just record me without consent, he actively humiliated me with those disgusting titles and comments, turning intimate moments into entertainment for strangers and profiting from my degradation. I describe the panic attacks and sleepless nights, and the way I can't trust anyone anymore, because the person I loved most turned out to be using me in the worst possible way. The judge listens carefully without interrupting, and when I finish, she thanks me for my courage in speaking, and says my voice matters in this process. Lustig keeps his eyes down the whole time, never once looking at me, and I realize he's exactly the coward I always knew he was. The judge accepts the plea agreement and moves straight to sentencing. She sentences Lustig to 5 years of probation with strict conditions including mandatory therapy twice a week, absolutely no contact with me in any form, GPS monitoring for the first year, so his location can be tracked at all times, no unsupervised internet access with all his devices, subject to monitoring and registration as a sex offender, which means his information will be public, and he'll have restrictions on where he can live and work. She also orders $25,000 in restitution for my therapy and legal costs, to be paid in monthly installments of $500. It's not prison, but it's serious consequences that will follow him for years, and the judge makes it really clear that any violations of any of these conditions will result in immediate jail time. Lustig has to enter a specialized treatment program for people who've committed sexual offenses, with regular reporting to his probation officer about his progress. He's prohibited from having any recording devices including cameras or audio recorders, and he can't access certain websites or apps without permission. His internet usage will be monitored through software on all his devices, so his probation officer can see everywhere he goes online. The restrictions feel appropriate for someone who violated privacy so systematically and deliberately, and knowing he's being watched this closely helps me feel safer. A week after the criminal sentencing, Justina calls with news about the civil settlement. Lustig's attorney reached out wanting to negotiate rather than go through full litigation, and after several days of back and forth, they've reached an agreement. Lustig will pay an additional $50,000 over 3 years in monthly installments, on top of the restitution from the criminal case. He has to issue a written apology acknowledging what he did was wrong and non-consensual, and he has to sign an agreement never to contact me or speak about me publicly in any form. The settlement includes a limited non-disclosure agreement that prevents him from profiting from this story through book deals or interviews or anything like that, but it allows me to speak freely about my experience if I choose to. Justina explains this is actually a really good outcome for a civil case, especially getting it resolved this quickly without years of litigation. It's not perfect justice because nothing can undo what he did or erase those videos from the internet completely, but it's concrete accountability and financial compensation for the harm he caused. The written apology arrives a few days later, and reading it makes me feel weird because the words sound hollow and forced, clearly written by his attorney, rather than coming from any real remorse. But having it in writing that he acknowledges what he did was wrong, and violated my consent matters anyway, even if I don't believe he actually feels sorry. I sign the settlement agreement and Justina files it with the court, and just like that, the legal cases are finally resolved. Lustig is facing years of consequences and restrictions and payments, and I can start moving forward knowing he's being held accountable in every way the law allows. A few weeks after signing the settlement, I get an email forwarded through Justina's office with a subject line that just says, "From Marlena Lustig." I almost delete it without reading, but something makes me open it anyway. The message is short and formal, clearly written with her therapist's help, saying she started therapy after Reese gave her an ultimatum about getting professional help or facing separation. She writes that she handled everything wrong, that she protected Lustig instead of supporting me, and she's working to understand why she made those choices. The email doesn't ask for forgiveness or try to excuse what she did. It just acknowledges the harm and says she's doing the work. I don't respond because I'm not ready for that and maybe never will be, but I save the email in a folder because it matters that she's at least starting to take some accountability, even if it took her marriage being threatened to get there. Stefan texts me a week later to say his parents started couples counseling, and I can tell from his message that he's not sure if I want updates about his family, but he thinks I should know they're taking this seriously. He explains that Reese insisted on counseling to address the patterns in their marriage that let them enable Lustig's behavior and try to cover it up instead of doing the right thing. They've set clear boundaries with Lustig now, requiring him to maintain his treatment and follow all his probation conditions, or they'll cut off financial and emotional support completely. Stefan says his dad checks in with Lustig's probation officer regularly, and his mom is working through her denial and enabling patterns in therapy, though it's slow progress. I appreciate the updates even though I didn't ask for them, because it helps me see that at least some of his family is trying to change instead of just pretending nothing happened. 2 months after the settlement, I get an email from Jeremy asking if I'd be open to occasional contact as she works on her own recovery. She explains she completed a program for family members affected by trauma, and she's been working with a therapist to understand her role in the family dysfunction. The email is careful and respectful, making it clear she's not asking for forgiveness or trying to rebuild a relationship, just wanting me to know she's doing the work, and she understands how wrong the barbecue situation was. She writes that she's learning about enabling and family systems, and how her fear of standing up to Marlena contributed to what happened to me. I think about it for a few days before responding, and when I do, I keep it brief and clear. I tell her I'm glad she's getting help and I'm willing to exchange occasional emails, but I'm not ready for anything more than that, and I might never be. She responds within an hour saying she completely understands and respects the boundary, and she thanks me for even being willing to have this limited contact. Her response feels genuine, and I appreciate that she's not pushing for more than I can give. Stefan and I meet for coffee 3 months after the legal cases wrap up, and he asks if I'd be comfortable maintaining a casual friendship now that everything is resolved. I realize as he's asking that I actually am comfortable with it, because he's been respectful of boundaries throughout this entire nightmare, and never pushed for more than I could handle. He never made my trauma about him, or tried to position himself as my rescuer or anything weird like that. He just consistently showed up in appropriate ways and respected when I needed space. We talk through what friendship would look like and agree on occasional coffee meetings and text check-ins, with clear understanding that this is platonic and nothing more. Stefan seems relieved to have the boundary stated explicitly, and he tells me he's been worried about crossing lines or making me uncomfortable, but he values having me in his life. I tell him I value his support and friendship too, and it feels good to establish something stable and clear after months of legal chaos and family drama. My therapy sessions with Dinah shift around the same time, moving from crisis management to longer-term healing work. We've been meeting weekly since right after the barbecue, but now we're reducing to every other week because I have reliable coping tools for managing triggers and intrusive thoughts. Dinah walks me through the transition carefully, making sure I feel ready and reminding me I can always increase frequency again if I need to. We spend a session reviewing all the strategies I've learned and the progress I've made in rebuilding trust in my own judgment. The trauma isn't erased and probably never will be completely, but I'm learning to carry it without letting it control my entire life. I can have bad days without spiraling into panic. I can recognize intrusive thoughts and challenge them instead of believing them, and I'm slowly rebuilding my sense of safety in the world. Dinah reminds me that healing isn't linear, and there will still be hard days, but the fact that I'm functioning and moving forward shows real progress. Mason sends me a quarterly report in month 4, showing the ongoing content removal efforts, and I sit at my kitchen table reading through pages of data about takedown requests and monitoring alerts. He successfully removed the videos from all major platforms and most medium-sized sites, but there are still scattered mirrors on smaller sites that are harder to reach legally. The report includes screenshots showing the content is gone from the original upload locations and most places it was shared, but Mason is honest that complete erasure probably isn't possible. He's maintaining monitoring alerts that notify him when my name or image appears on new sites, and he'll keep submitting takedown requests as long as needed. I read through the technical details about digital footprints and cached content and mirror sites, and I feel this weird mix of relief that so much is gone and resignation that this will be an ongoing management issue for years. I email Mason back thanking him for the thorough work and asking him to continue the monitoring, and I try to make peace with the fact that this is something I'll have to deal with forever, instead of something with a clean resolution. My boss calls me into her office 5 months after the barbecue to formally document my accommodations and confirm my performance is back to normal levels. She's been supportive throughout this whole thing, giving me flexibility for therapy and legal appointments without making me explain every detail, and now she wants to make sure the formal documentation reflects that I received appropriate support. We review the accommodation letter that HR prepared, and she adds notes about my current performance being fully back to standard. HR closes out my case file with notes that I received appropriate support and maintained employment throughout a serious personal crisis. Work feels stable again in a way it hasn't since before I found out about the videos, and I'm even taking on new projects and considering a promotion opportunity that just opened up. My boss tells me she's impressed with how I've handled everything, and she's confident recommending me for the promotion. Having this part of my life functioning normally helps me feel like I'm rebuilding instead of just surviving, like I'm actually moving forward instead of staying stuck in crisis mode. I start volunteering with an online support community for survivors of privacy violations around month 5, offering peer support and sharing resources that helped me through my own situation. The community moderator approves my application after a video interview where I explain my experience and what I hope to contribute, and she assigns me to help moderate the newcomer forum where people first arrive after discovering violations. I spend a few hours each week responding to posts from people who are in crisis, sharing information about legal options and therapy resources, and practical steps for documentation and takedown requests. Turning my experience into something that helps others feels meaningful without being performative, and it gives me a sense of purpose beyond just my own healing. I'm careful about boundaries and self-care, logging off when I feel triggered or overwhelmed, but the work feels genuinely valuable. Other survivors message me privately to say my responses helped them feel less alone, or gave them practical steps to take, and those messages remind me that something good can come from even the worst experiences. 6 months after the barbecue, I meet Stefan and Reese for dinner at a quiet restaurant across town, and I'm surprised by how comfortable the conversation feels. We talk about normal things like work projects and hobbies and plans for the upcoming holidays, and while there's underlying sadness about how we all ended up here, there's also genuine warmth. Reese asks about my job and seems genuinely interested when I tell him about the promotion I'm considering, and he shares that he's been volunteering with a men's group that focuses on accountability and healthy relationships. Stefan talks about a photography project he's working on and shows us some of his recent shots on his phone. We avoid talking about Lustig or the legal stuff or any of the heavy topics, and it feels good to just have a normal meal with people who've become part of my support system. Reese has become someone I cautiously trust after watching him consistently choose accountability over protecting his son, and Stefan remains a solid friend who proved himself through months of consistent, respectful behavior. When we leave the restaurant, Reese hugs me carefully and tells me he's proud of how strong I've been, and I realize I actually believe he means it. I book a solo weekend trip to the mountains the following week, something I haven't done since before I met Lustig because he always complained about hiking and camping. I pack my car with camping gear and snacks and a stack of books I've been meaning to read, and I drive 3 hours into the national forest to a campground I used to visit in college. The first day I hike 6 miles through pine forests and along ridgelines, stopping to take photos and just breathe in air that smells like trees and dirt instead of city pollution. My body feels safe enough to relax in a way it hasn't in months, my shoulders dropping from around my ears and my jaw unclenching. I set up my tent at a campsite overlooking a small lake and spend the evening reading by lantern light, listening to crickets and night birds instead of traffic and sirens. I sleep deeply both nights without nightmares, waking up to sunrise over the mountains and morning mist on the water. The trip reminds me that I can enjoy my own company, that I'm capable of doing things alone that bring me joy, and that healing includes reclaiming experiences Lustig's violation took from me. I take dozens of photos to remember this feeling of peace and safety and independence, and I make plans to come back next month because this place feels like mine again. The week after I get back from the mountains, Blake asks if I want to try a dating app again, and I realize I don't. I'm not avoiding it out of fear this time. I'm just genuinely not interested yet because my life feels full enough without adding romance to the mix. Work is going well, and I'm actually enjoying my projects instead of just getting through them. And therapy with Dinah has shifted from crisis management to longer-term stuff, about rebuilding trust in myself. I started painting again last month, setting up an easel in the corner of my apartment, and working on landscapes that remind me of the mountain trip. The book club I joined meets every other Thursday, and I actually look forward to it. Sitting in someone's living room drinking wine and arguing about character motivations with people who have no idea what happened to me. Next month, I'm flying out to visit Blake's family for a long weekend, and I'm excited about it in a way I haven't been excited about anything in years. My life has shape and purpose again, filled with things I chose because they bring me joy, not because someone else wanted me to do them or not do them. Dating will happen when I'm ready, and I trust myself enough now to know I'll recognize that moment when it comes. Looking back at where I was 6 months ago, shaking so hard in Stefan's car outside that cheap motel that I couldn't even unbuckle my seatbelt, drowning in shock, and violation and the horrible realization that nothing in my relationship had been real, I can see how far I've come even though some days it doesn't feel like enough. I'm not fixed and I'm not over it because trauma doesn't work that way, but I'm safe now in my own apartment with locks I control and a support system I trust. Lustig is on probation with sex offender registration following him everywhere, facing real consequences that will impact his life for years. I have people I can call when the panic attacks hit, therapy appointments that actually help, and a future I'm building piece by piece that belongs completely to me. Some nights I still wake up thinking about those video titles or wondering if someone I pass on the street has seen them. But those nights are getting less frequent, and I have tools now for getting through them. Stefan texts every few weeks to check in, and we grab coffee sometimes, and Reese sends occasional updates about Marlena's therapy progress. And these connections feel stable in a way I didn't think family relationships could feel after everything that happened. I'm not waiting for my life to start again once I'm healed. I'm living it right now with all the messy, complicated reality of ongoing recovery. That's enough for now.